Okay, so good afternoon once more, ladies and gentlemen. So this week we look at chapter number 2 of the PHP 7 tutorial from w3schools.com. Last week we looked at chapter number 1. In chapter number 1, we strived to understand why PHP, where PHP have been used before, how you can use PHP, the kind of things PHP can output. We also had a sneak peek of the PHP syntax and particularly how to declare variables in chapter number 1, and also the scope of variables, local, global, and static. So those are some of the things that we looked in chapter number 1. In chapter number 2, we are going to sink or dive a little bit deeper into some of the interesting PHP concepts. Now, just like any programming language, PHP also has a means of outputting things on the window. And for that, we either use the echo statement or the print statement. Now, they're almost the same, but really they have some key differences that we can have a look at here. Now, one of them is that the echo statement has no return value, while the print statement has a return value, and that return value is 1. And therefore, this print statement can be used in an expression and it will return a value 1. Also, echo can take in multiple parameters or arguments, if you want to call it, while print can only take one argument, one parameter. So that's the other difference. And lastly, echo is faster, but they're careful to say marginally faster than the print statement. So these are the two. Let's see how we use, for example, the echo statement. Now, the echo statement can be used either with or without parentheses. Most of the time, in most scenarios, you'll get that they use it without parentheses. So look how they've used it here, echo. Then we want to print some string. So in order to print a string, for example, you must have an opening quote, you must have a closing quote. Now the string can be any statements, including HTML tags, as you can see in this particular example. So this is just another example of the echo and this one here. And you can also, you remember, we said that the echo statement can take in multiple parameters. So as you know, when you learned about functions in C and C++, when we want to pass several parameters to a particular function, we normally separate them with commas. So here really, we are simply passing this string as the first argument or parameter. Then this one, the second one. Then we separate again with a comma. Then the third one. And then again comma. Then fourth. Then fifth. So these echo statement can take in multiple parameters. While really, when it comes to print, you can't be able to do this. So when we say that an echo can be able to, you can be able to also use parentheses, this is what we mean. That, for example, the first example here can be rewritten as echo. Then just like in some other languages, H2, H2, then PHP is fine, like that. So we can be able to rewrite that statement like that. Oh, sorry, I actually forgot. I actually forgot to do the closing H2 term. So you can also do that, but for simplicity purposes, you can just write echo without the parentheses. Okay. Okay, so you can also use echo to display variables. Look at it at this particular example. So we have variable 1 here called txt1. Then we've given it a string learn PHP. You can see here, learn PHP. Then we have txt, $txt2. So these are variables in case you missed the last class. And we are assigning it using the assignment operator. This operator, in maths you call it equal sign, but here we call it an assignment operator, used to assign values to variables. We also have a variable x and a variable y, which we've assigned the values 5 and 4 respectively. So how then do we print out variables using the echo statement? Now you can do that in one of the 2 or 3 ways. Okay, number one, let me just show you the first example, which I think is not here. Now here, I want to in fact rewrite this in a lazy form. You can actually write that as echo, then that, then h2, then that, then txt1 like that, then we close that, h2 like that. So that is how, if you do this, if you write this statement, then it's going to print out this learn PHP like that. So that's the easiest way to do it. What that means is that you can't print variables within a string, because anytime we put things inside double quotes in PHP, then whatever is within that double quote is taken off to be a string. So you can't be able to do that. But in this particular example, they have used what we call in programming concatenation. Concatenation is simply joining strings together. While in some programming languages, we use a plus to concatenate. In PHP, we use a dot to concatenate. So this is the first string, this is the second string, and this is the third string. So after the first string, dot, we add another string, dot, then we add another string, then semicolon. So that is how we do concatenation. So you can actually be able to also do that like that. So the second example here is the same, but what is quite different here is this one. You can also be able to print out variables in an expression. So here we're simply saying echo x plus y. So that will output this value 9, because this expression is going to be evaluated, then the value of the results is going to be outputted to the screen. So 9 like that. So I hope you understand that. Okay, then we have the print statement. So print statement can also be used with or without parentheses. So those are the 2 ways. As you can see here, these are just examples, and they're very similar to the other one. In displaying variables, the print statement also works in a very similar way to the echo statement. So I'm not going to dive in much into that. Okay, now, even though we said that PHP is a loosely typed language, the truth is that behind the scenes, PHP will convert your variables to particular data types depending on the value that you store in it. Now, just as a reminder, A data type is simply the type of data that you want to store in that variable. A variable is a container. It is a place in memory that is created in order to store some data. Now that data is going to be of a particular type, and that is what we call a data type. Now PHP supports the following. It supports the following data types: string, integer, float, boolean. We also have array. We also have objects if you create a class, an interesting one called null, and we also have resource. So let's just have a look into some of this. So a string particularly is a sequence of characters, a sequence of characters. For example, hello world. It is common that anytime we write a string, then we put it inside quotes. It can be single quotes or it can be double quotes. As you can see here, we've used double quotes, but you can use either. But there's a difference. There's a difference between using double quotes and single quotes. So I'm giving you that as a reading assignment. Go and find out the difference between using single quotes and double quotes. In this example, we are declaring a variable x and assigning it a string value, hello world, and an exclamation mark. Then we're also declaring a variable y, and assigning it a value. This time, instead of using double quotes, we use single quotes. Now, if we echo x, then it's going to output hello world. Then we are echoing break. BR is for break, that is used to insert a blank space so that whatever is printed next begins on a new line. So after that, then we echo y, and y there is going to also output the value hello world. So really, that is how we strings are actually declared and assigned in PHP. Then the next one here is integer. An integer is defined as a non-decimal number. A non-decimal number between this value negative, this value positive. An integer, for it to qualify to be an integer, there are some rules that must be met. One of them is that you must have at least one digit. The other one is that it must not have a decimal point. The other one is that it can be a positive or a negative, and integers can be specified in decimal, not decimal point, but base 10, or hexadecimal, or octal, base 8, or binary, base 2 notation. So in your program, you can specify an integer using any of those numbering systems. In the following example, x is an integer. Look here. So x is equals to 5985. So we are simply assigning this value 5985 to the variable x. Now, in order to see the data type and the value of this variable x, we can use a function called var dump. So normally receives one argument, which is the name of your variable, $, then the name of your variable. So var dump. So it's going to print out the type, the data type of that variable, and in brackets, the value that has been stored inside that variable. So indeed, we can confirm that this value is an integer. int is the short form for integer in PHP. Then you have floating point numbers. Floating point numbers are numbers that have a decimal point, or a number in exponential exponential form. I can't remember the meaning of that in maths. In the following example, x is a float. So x is a float because this number we've assigned is 10.365. Again, we can use the var_dump function to print out the type, the data type, and the value that we've stored in that variable x. Then we have the Boolean data type. Boolean represents only two possible states. Two possible states. The first state is true, the other one is false. So you can only assign a true or a false value to a Boolean data type. Then we have arrays, PHP arrays. Very interesting. Now, an array, unlike a variable which stores a single value, an array can be able to store multiple values in one single variable. Now, in this example, we have an array called cars. Excuse me. As you can see, we just declare it like any other variable, but when we assign a value to it, we use the array function. So array, then in brackets, we assign several values separated by commas. So we've assigned Volvo, BMW, and Toyota. Now, if we use var_dump and we put cars, it's going to tell us that this is an array and it has 3 values. Now, these 3 values is what is called the size of the array. So this array cars is of size 3. But the other thing it's going to show us is the position of each of the values. The first position in an array is position 0. In this position, we've stored a string. It has 5 characters, and this is the value, Volvo. The second position is this one, position 1. It is a string. It has 3 characters, BMW. Third position, string 6, Toyota. So that is what we call an array. Arrays are very important, and we are going to see some of the use cases of arrays when we look at, when we begin building our project that we're going to be doing as the project for this particular theory lesson. Okay, now after an array, the other data type we have is what we call the object. The object is actually a user-defined data type because you use what we call a class to be able to create an object. So an object is a data type which stores data and information on how to process that data. So an object, for it to be used, it must be explicitly declared. So explicit means you have to declare it. You have to declare it. Implicit in programming means you can, or the program can do it for you. And by saying the program, I mean the compiler. Okay, so first we must declare a class of the object. Then we use the class keyword to create the object. So a class is a structure that contains properties and methods. In simpler terms, a class is a structure that contains variables. These are simply variables and functions. Variables are used to store the data, while methods are used to process the information or the data. So that is what a class is all about. Okay, anyone with a question so far, by the way, before we look at this class? So it's important, especially to mention at this point, that PHP supports both procedural programming paradigm, and it also supports object-oriented programming paradigm. So you choose the one that you want to flow with, but it is highly advised for you to be able to build projects more efficiently with PHP. Then the object-oriented way is the way to go. Okay, so this is how we create a class. We use the class keyword, and then the name of the class. Now, inside the class, by saying inside, I mean we define the beginning of a class using the opening curly brackets and the end using the closing curly bracket. So anything that is in between that then is inside the class. So inside the class, we can create functions. Inside the class, we can create variables. Those variables are called properties. Those functions, like this function car, is called a method. It's called a method. So here, we are creating a function car. And as you can see, it has the same name. It has the same name as the class. And therefore, this function is called a constructor because it has the same name. A constructor is automatically called and executed when you create an object from that particular class. Then again, just like in C, in Java, in C++, we also have the this keyword. So this keyword is used to specify that we are creating a variable called model that is going to be associated with that particular object that has called this function. And we are going to assign it a value VW. So how do we create an object here? We simply do it the same way we create a variable. So $, then the name of the object, for example, Hardy here. Then we use the assignment operator. Then we use the new keyword, then the name of the class and empty parentheses. So when we do that, it's going to create an object of type car. So then we can be able to print out the value that has been stored on that object. So for example, Hardy, then we use the arrow operator model. So it's going to output VW. It's going to output VW. Okay. Now, this is another interesting concept in PHP. Now, the null value. Now null is a special data type which can only have one value. Null simply means empty. A variable of data type null is a variable that has no value assigned to it. Now, just to let you know, anytime you create a variable and you don't assign it a value, then it is automatically assigned a value of null. You can also empty a variable by assigning it a value null. So what does that mean? What that means is this, you have x, you have a variable x, you've assigned it, for example, you've assigned it a value January, like that. So if you echo x, then this is going to output Jan. Sorry. Now, after that, if you do x is equals to null, if you echo x, then it's going to output null. Null means I don't have anything inside me. So that is the null value. Okay, so this is just an example, almost the same one that I've given. You assign a variable, the value null, to var them, then it's just going to print null. Doesn't have a value in it, so just the data type now. Okay, now let's have a look at string functions. String functions are very important in PHP. When you build projects, you're going to realize how important they are when it comes to manipulating strings. Luckily, it's a very easy task to achieve because we have predefined functions that are used. You just call them and they'll be able to manipulate your strings. One of them that is very important is the string length function. So this one here is short form for string length. String length. And as you might have guessed already, it is used to return the length of the string. So for example here, if we do echo, then string length, then we put some value, a string inside it, then it's going to output the length of that particular string. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the space, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. One use case for this, for example, sometimes you want to check when you're told that a password can only be cannot be less than 8 characters. You use the string length. We use the string length. So we simply do a statement like if string length, the variable name. So for example, the variable name is password. So if that is less than 8, then we want to tell echo password cannot be less than 8 characters, something like that. So that's just a use case of a string length function. Then we have word count. str, string word count, returns the number of words. So this one is gonna output 2. So it only counts the words after space. So 1, 2. So in some application forms, for example, when you're told to do an essay on why you are interested on the job, and it should go beyond 200 words, then they can use this function to count the number of words. Then you have string reverse, used to reverse the string from the last to the first. So hello world, from the last to the first. Then we have string position. It's used to search for a text within a string. Excuse me. So here, if a match is found, the function returns the character position of the first match. If no match is found, it will return the value false. So the first character position in a string is 0, not 1. Just like In fact, a string is an array of characters. So what they're saying here is that this is H is position 0. Then this is position 1. This is position 2. Okay, so I hope you understand that. Now, let's look at how string position works. So this is the string position function. You give it 2 parameters. This is the first parameter. And this is what you're searching. So we want to search world in this string. So it's going to give the position of the first match. So here it's going to output 6. Why? Because it's going to find the world here. So you see this is position 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. So that's why it's going to output 6. So string position. Okay, then we have string replace. As you might have guessed, the function of this function, string function, is to replace text within a string. Okay, so string replace. Then we have world, we have dolly, and we have hello world. So what do we have here? Now the first argument here is what we want to replace. So we want to replace this on this string with this. So what we're saying is search for world and change it to dolly. So this is going to output hello dolly. Okay, so we have quite a number of string functions. I advise that you visit this particular link on w3schools.com in order to have a look at the complete PHP string reference. Otherwise, let us proceed. Excuse me. So here, we want to look at PHP numbers. As we've said a number of times, PHP provides automatic data type conversion. That is, if you assign a variable one data type, then you assign it another data type, it's just gonna change the data type. So that is what we're saying there. So if you assign an integer value to a variable, the type that variable will automatically be an integer. If you assign it a string, then it will change to a string. However, there is a danger in this. There's a danger in this because it is easy to sometimes make errors as a human and use a variable which you've assigned a string, you use it as an integer or vice versa. And especially now when you want to store stuff in the database. Because in the database, when we create fields, we specify the data type. So if we've specified the data type, for example, in the database as an integer, and you want to store in a string, then that can break your code. That can break your code. So an integer is a number without any decimal part. We have some functions that are used to verify if a value is an integer. There are 3. The first one is is_int, or you can use the full one here, is_integer, or you can use is_long. So those are the 3 that you can use. Now, why is this important? Sometimes you want to test things like the national identification number. you don't want a user putting a character on their national ID because most likely on your database, you've created a field for storing national ID and you've specified it as an integer. So you have to check, you have to confirm using these functions whether the value they provided is an integer before you store it. So these functions are used for that purpose. Okay, here we have an example of an integer. So you see, you do that, then var dump, so that will give us true. So you can see that inside the var dump, we have another function, is underscore int. So this will return either true or false. So we do var dump, you can see that simply telling us that whatever we've put inside there is a boolean, and the value inside that boolean is true. Otherwise, if we assign x a decimal number and we use is int, then it's going to return false. Excuse me. Then we have a float. A float is a number with a decimal point. Now we have functions that are used to check whether a number is a float or a double. A double is simply a long float. That means it has more numbers after the decimal point. So you can check here, we're just checking if x is a decimal number. So we can use is float x. So it's going to return true because indeed 10.365 is a decimal number. Then you have what we call numerical strings. Numerical strings. A numerical string is simply a number that has been put in quotes. Yes, it's a number, but you've put it in quotes. So that's why we call it a numerical string. A numerical string. Now, for example, you can have, for example, x. X is equals to 10. So that's a numerical string because we've put it in quotes. Now, PHP has a function called isNumeric that can be used to find whether a variable is numeric. So the function returns true if the variable is a number or a numeric string. You can see. So two things, whether it's a number or a numeric string. Okay, so let's have an example here. So x is equals to 5985. So if we use this numeric, it's going to return true because indeed it's a number. Then x is equals to, in double quotes, 5985. We use this numeric, it's going to return true because it's a numeric string. So this is a numeric string. Then x is equals to that plus 100. So we want to add a float to an integer. So is numeric, is this true? So it's going to return true because how PHP does this is that it does automatic type conversion. So it's going to convert this 59.85 into an integer. So the numeric string into an integer, then add it to 100. So that's how it's going to do it. What I'm not sure is whether this is going to be rounded up or rounded down. I'm not sure whether it's going to be 60 or it's going to be 59. So you can try that when you write your program during the practical. Okay, and then you have the last one here. X is equals to hello. And if we do is numeric, we get false because hello is not a number or a numeric string. So I hope you understand that. So whatever I just explained on the previous slide is what we call typecasting. Typecasting. Casting really in any programming language is simply converting a data type from one type to another, like from a numeric string to an integer. That is from a string actually to an integer, or from an integer to a float, or from a float to an integer. So sometimes you need to cast a numerical value into another data type. So to do that, you can use these functions int or integer or int val. So let's have a look at how to do that. So in the first example, we want to convert a float to an integer. So that is what is called casting. So we have a float value here, 23,465.768. So we declare another variable called int cast. Then we use the function int inside brackets like that. Then the name of the variable that we want to cast. So after we do that and we do echo, then this is going to output this. It's going to output 23,465. So simply going to remove this because we've now changed this value to an integer, to a whole number. Okay, the second example here is converting a string, a numerical string to be precise, to an integer. So you can see here, we are assigning x to a string because it's in double quotes, 23465.768. So we declare another variable here. You can call it y if you don't like this variable name, like I don't like it. Then you use the int function like that, then the name of the variable. So if we print y, then we get this value. So we've just changed. We've changed this to this. So that is what we call casting. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'll now take any questions that you guys have on this particular topic before we proceed for a short break and come and do some practical. Anyone with a question?